Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County Live webinar, The Customer Experience. I'm Steve Smith, the webinar coordinator and a business mentor at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host today. Our presenter is Denise Graziano, and we'll get to Denise in just a second, but first let me give you a little background on SCORE. Many of you already are familiar with this, but some I don't think are. SCORE is an organization that was set up back in the mid-'60s. It's a part of the Small Business Administration. We have about 320 offices and over 10,000 volunteers throughout the United States. And our mission is really to help small businesses get started and thrive. In Fairfield County, we have, as I said, our practices, our offices in Norwalk on East Avenue. We've got just over 100 volunteers that have industry expertise, process expertise, specifically like this one in the customer experience would be, a process and a subject matter expert, Denise Graziano, is going to pass on that information to us. We have workshops, and we have live face-to-face workshops that we conduct primarily at the libraries around Fairfield County. And we do, in the neighborhood this year, we're going to do probably close to 150 workshops. And we also do webinars, and yes, you're right, you're on a webinar. And we started our webinar program really at the end of last year. We're doing it currently once a month. And our next one is June 6th. So I'll tell you about that again in a little second. We also do one-on-one counseling at our offices on East Avenue in Norwalk, or even at a Starbucks or a diner or wherever a convenient place would be, where you can bring your issues, your concerns, and work with, as I said, either a process expert or an industry expert to help you kind of put your business plan together or run your business, things of that nature. It's very important that to get the full breadth of everything we do, that you make note of the following website, scorefairfieldcounty.org. No spaces, scorefairfieldcounty.org. That'll give you all the detail, and you can actually sign up for workshops. You can sign up for and find out how to get to webinars. Also, you'll find webinars online there that we have done in the past 60 or 90 days. So please make sure you go there. As I said, our next webinar is June 7th, and our speaker will be Cliff Enico. Some of you know Cliff, I'm sure, and the subject is going to be crowdfunding. So you'll see the specifics of that at our website as well. Now, specific to today's event, the webinar is going to last an hour. We'll stop at 1 o'clock. The conference is being recorded, and the information will be available on the website later in this week. I've also set aside about 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the hour for Q&A. And so if you look down in the lower left part of your screen, if you're on a computer, you can see the chat room. So feel free, and please do, put your questions down there. And in the last 10 minutes, I'll kind of moderate those Q's and A's and watch them as you list them, and then pass them on to Denise. Speaking of Denise, she is a strategic thinker and leader with nearly 30 years of business experience, also a speaker and an author of many articles on customer experience, the employee experience, finding and retaining clients, and sales and trade show practices. She's president of Graziano Associates, and she focuses on fast-growing mid-market and larger companies, but also small businesses where the customer experience is incredibly important as well. And she is really here to help you kind of deepen your relationship with your existing customers, or to reach out to customers and make them feel a part of your organization. So I'm going to stop now and turn it over to Denise. And I said I'll be back when she finishes, and we'll do a Q&A. Okay, Denise, over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. So I want to let you in on a little secret. Your clients are judging you, and how you respond to that fact can either increase or decrease your revenue, your client retention, and your overall brand image. You may or may not have heard or seen these stats earlier in the year that customer experience would be the #1 marketing trend for this year. It's a word the term that's talked about quite a bit in business these days, but more importantly, this final stat that as of this year, 89% of companies expect to be competing mostly on the basis of customer experience. And what that says is you have to pay attention to client retention. You have to pay attention to taking care of your all-important clients. There are many reasons for why this shift is occurring. And truthfully, the customers have so much power right now. There is unprecedented platform reach, community, and impact because of social media. Customers are not afraid to share their voice, and their comments are being taken very seriously by companies of all sizes. As consumers, of course, we all want and deserve a positive customer experience. But I don't know if you're aware that reducing your customer defection rate by only 5% can increase profitability anywhere from 25 to 95%. So again, that stresses the importance of client retention. Unfortunately, the sad reality is, though, many companies are not successful when they attempt to address customer experience on their own. And the problem's growing. In fact, last year there was an overall decline in customer experience ratings across all industries. And interestingly, you can see increases in revenue, but as we see in many fast-growing companies, there can be a correlation with a decline in customer experience. So think of it this way. Think of your own favorite best-kept secret. It could be a restaurant, a bakery, an online service provider, a business partner, vendor that you do business with that you absolutely love because they're this gem and you really want them to succeed. And then they do grow. And then you check back a little while later and something's different. Something about the experience that made them so great isn't the same. And it happens very often. What the result is that it takes its toll on growth and revenue. And there are many reasons for why companies are not too successful. And it comes from a variety of things, from misguided thinking about customer experience, not really fully understanding what it is. Some companies make a half-hearted approach. We'll throw a little bit of money at it and see what happens. Or they do poor imitations of others' actions or their competitors' actions. Some companies or executives just think they're immune. Oh, we're in an industry that's not going to be affected by this. That's the attitude they have. Or they just simply don't understand the impact that it has on the bottom line. And one very large other factor is that consistently providing a top-notch customer experience takes work, and some companies are not willing to do it. So let's discuss its relevance in small business, in your business. And yes, it is affecting all businesses, B2B, B2C, large business, small business. It's even affecting government, higher education, and healthcare. Really, no one is immune. And even those companies, I'll get into it a little later, that have more of a monopoly situation, they're not immune because of the platform that social media gives the customers. So I first want to talk about what customer experience is and what it's not. A lot of people think that it's just customer service or just customer engagement. But in reality, and also some companies think that it's a straight line, from pre-sale to post-sale, from prospect to client, and that's the end of the relationship. But in reality, it's the many, many points of contact that you and your customer have over time. And it's both the actual interactions as well as the subconscious perceptions that the customers have. And I'll get more into that in a moment as well. in reality, customer experience should be a very circular experience. And there's so much that's front-loaded in the pre-purchase process. Think about all of the information that's out there about your company, whether it's on your own website, what your sales materials may say, if you have salespeople, what they're actually verbally saying, if anything is written about you in your industry or in your community, any kind of reviews that are out there. All of this, or if you exhibit at trade shows, all of this information has to reflect what it would be like to work with you before the customer even talks to you. In fact, there's a study that says 74% of buyers decide who they're going to work with before they even contact that company for the first time. So what you put out there about your company is essential that it matches up with people can expect to work with you. So then comes the purchasing process, and I'm not talking about just a shopping cart or a cash register point of sale. I'm talking about what that experience is like. What does it look like for the customer? What does your place of business look like? Then there's the actual using of your product or service. How does that go? And any necessary follow-ups that come with that. It could be maintenance, it could be replenishment, or if there's a problem, what are your service and conflict resolution policies? If you're really lucky, the client will be satisfied and they'll want to repeat the process. And if you're even more fortunate, they'll refer people and bring along additional clients for the ride. Now, back in the 80s, a Dr. Elizabeth Saunders had come up with a very simple pyramid metric to describe the three necessary components of what a good customer experience would be. And she said that if all three of these things weren't met, that the customer would possibly move on to an alternative. And she said, was it meeting our needs? Is it easy to use? And is it enjoyable? Now, another look at that might be, is it functional? Is it accessible? And what's the emotional connection to working with your company? Now, that enjoyable and emotional section of the pyramid may not be the largest, but it actually can be the deciding factor on whether or not somebody wants to continue to work with you. So this very simple metric is a great benchmark to take each aspect of your business and see if it actually is meeting those needs. Because at any time, if we're not satisfied with who we're working with, we're going to think of alternatives. And if you don't, what happens is, if the customer works with you the one time and then they leave, that's a one-time customer. And what will happen in a situation like that is that you may have a very busy business. You may have the hottest new restaurant in town, right? And then people come and they're not satisfied with the experience because you have a long wait. When people, after that 45-minute wait, they get in the door and your staff maybe isn't as courteous or attentive as they should be. And maybe the food isn't that great when the people get their food. So after that kind of experience, certainly it's not enjoyable and they're not going to want to repeat it. So what that means is no matter how hot a business may be, if all you have are one-time customers and not repeat business, the company's not going to do well in the long term. And what happens then is churn. Churn is a term in business that, in the most simplest sense, it's the amount of customers lost over a given period of time. And the impact of churn in this graphic, as I was saying with fast-growing companies, the customer experience can start to decline. But before people fully grasp that change, your revenue might continue to rise. But if the pattern continues and the customer experience declines, then the revenue and the customer experience will tail off and remain that way. Whereas in reality, your goal should always have to be having customer experience and revenue rising in a parallel fashion. Again, the reasons that it happens during times of fast growth, and you can lose customers at any time in a business. In fact, there are controllable reasons and there are uncontrollable reasons. Controllable reasons might be price, product, location, delivery, those kinds of aspects of your business. The ones that are less controllable or uncontrollable is if a client's buying habits change or their taste changes, or if maybe it's a B2B client and they have a bad earnings report and they have to pull back spending. You can't do anything about that. But during periods of fast growth, what might happen is the company can't keep up with the volume, so they start to cut corners. Or maybe they start to use lesser quality materials, or they don't hire very well, or they hire well but they don't have time to train them very well, or they don't put management and leadership in place that is going to lead the company very well. So all of those things impact the business result and the customer experience, and then you lose them, and that is the impact of churn during fast growth. So in my 30 years of business experience and my really extensive research in customer and employee experience, I've identified these 9 critical areas that I think every company should be measuring and monitoring, because if you're not, you could be driving your customers away. And the ones that I have in bold, I feel, are even more dangerous to companies because they're not as closely associated with customer experience, and they're not as frequently monitored. There are companies, and you've heard the terms big data and analytics, and there are a lot of aspects of business that get monitored regularly, which is great. But there was a new study that came out that said in the S&P 500, so very large companies, some of the top value drivers of their companies are intangibles, meaning the things that you can't necessarily monitor, like customer satisfaction, overall business practices, and customer service practices. So some of those intangibles fall into these critical churn triggers. And what I'd like to do today is get through these 9 areas and give you examples of not only could they be a reason that you might be losing customers, but to then look at it from the perspective of how can you use it to your advantage. If you can turn it around and use it as a way to increase revenue, increase client retention, and overall brand image, that's the approach you should try to take. So number 1 is perception and perspective. Don't let your own marketing materials and your own rhetoric about your company cloud your vision. Just because you say your customers love working with you doesn't mean they agree that it's a smooth, enjoyable journey for them. This stat is really very significant. It says 70% of buying experiences are based on how the customer feels they're being treated. So that goes back to that subconscious perception I mentioned a few minutes ago. And what it says is the client's perception about working with you is the ultimate truth. If they don't feel like it's a good experience, if they don't feel like you're giving them the value that they want, that's all that matters to them. It doesn't matter how many bullet points or how many slick documents or website copy that you have. It doesn't matter. You always have to be paying attention and keeping a pulse on what your customers are saying back to you and asking you for, because if you do that and you do it well, you can find other ways to increase what you're doing for them and increase revenue. With regard to perspective, that's about how you look at your role in this experience. And you should always be looking at your product or service as a solution to a problem that your clients have. Right? You always have to be looking at yourself as a problem solver and an ally to your client. I don't care if you're in the restaurant business or you're doing high-level strategies. You have to look at what you're providing for them. And again, it's not your bullet points of what you have to sell. It's what you're trying to do for the client. And a lot of companies still get this wrong. It really does amaze me that they don't go back to the basics. Really, do you know your customer? Are you using client avatars so that you really get the essence of who your ideal client is and what they need from you? Again, if you do this well, not only are you not going to drive customers away, you're going to find ways to serve them in bigger and better ways. Number 2 is infrastructure. Infrastructure takes so many forms in businesses, and in particularly small businesses. I think that you might have a bigger advantage from some larger companies because there are fewer moving parts, right? So I want to give you a few examples, and this one is about Fidelity Investments, which is a very large company, but the proportion of this case study is very helpful. So about 5 or 6 years ago, they realized that their own clients were having difficulty logging into their own accounts, and they were using those expensive call centers. So people were calling in with problems to log in. So they invested $20,000 to fix the flaw in their website, in their system. Now, in and of itself, that may sound like a huge amount of money, but annual savings because of that fix saved them $4 million. $4 million from a $20,000 investment. They didn't stop there, though. They continued to assess the whole Fidelity organization, and they found other areas that needed attention. When they were done doing all of these project upgrades, they saved an additional $20 million a year. So when you look at a proportionate investment you can make in your company, that can pay you back in extraordinarily high dividends. So when you think of infrastructure, it can be your website. It can be as simple as making it abundantly clear where you're located. Don't leave it to Google Maps. Don't leave it to people finding how to reach you on their own. You have to make things as easy as possible for your clients, for your buyers. Now, for those of you who may use sales agents or brokers or outside salespeople, another way of looking at infrastructure is what kind of tools are you providing them? When you're giving them sales materials or information about you or how they fill out forms or whatever it is, however they conduct business for you, if you're not giving them the best tools that help them to serve their clients better, they're going to look for partners who can serve them better because they want to look good to their clients, and you have to give them the tools that they need to do that. So again, infrastructure can take so many forms within a small business. And unless you're looking at ways that you could be making transactions with you difficult, you may be losing customers. And so infrastructure is something that you could literally spend weeks looking at every bit of your company. And the thing is, once you do assess it, it's not a set it and forget it situation. You have to go back periodically and see how it's doing. Get the feedback from your clients and then upgrade, change, adapt as accordingly. Number 3 is service and conflict resolution. Now, this is an area where most companies do measure what's going on in their organization. But as we all can attest to, I'm sure we can all raise our hands by saying, yes, we've been on the phone forever with a bank or the credit card company or satellite radio or the phone company with some sort of a problem. And it's frustrating and it's maddening in how it's handled. So big companies, small companies, everybody gets this wrong when it comes to trying to facilitate giving the client what they need to be whole. And when a client is 4 times more likely to buy from a competitor over a service problem versus a price or product problem, it's essential that you pay attention to how you're handling things for a client. Now, whenever something goes wrong, and I don't care, eventually in business, if you're in business a long time, something goes wrong periodically. How you handle that can be whether or not you keep them as clients. So that means acknowledging what happened, apologizing for what happened, figuring out a way to make it right, and then sorting out on the back end what went wrong. That's for you to figure out. But keeping your clients satisfied is important. In fact, in the sales process, it's interesting to note that our brains are wired to remember stories, so a beginning, middle, and end. And even if a story hasn't gone well, so a client maybe has a bad experience with your company, if you can change the ending and make it a positive one, that's what they're more likely to remember and more likely to forgive. So it's very important to have these service and conflict policies and procedures in place before anything happens. And also surround yourself with strong partners so that you are able to bounce back from something like this. Along the way, we have to create experiences that build trust and loyalty because those are the drivers that keep clients coming back and get them to refer other people to you. When you look at this one stat here about unhappy customers not willingly doing business again with the same company, right? So even those that are in a situation where they can't leave, say you have a cable company and they can't change the cable company, they're going to talk badly about that company, and that hurts their brand image. So building trust and loyalty is very important. And again, many companies and large companies still get this wrong. This happens to be a slide from the Better Business Bureau for the 2013 and 14, and I believe 2015 had the same top 3. And you look at all the telecommunications companies. They infuriate people. They're the most complained about companies. And they are trying to do a better job with customer experience, but because of business policies and practices, they're not all getting on board fast enough to keep up with losing customers. And in fact, in this industry alone, I think 62% of global telecommunications companies switched over the course of a year because of service issues and conflicts. Number 4 is customization. Now, I think this is a great opportunity for all businesses to do a better job of personalizing the way that you conduct business with your clients. And smaller businesses and brick-and-mortar businesses have an advantage, I feel, over larger companies because they've always had the ability to interact more directly with clients. Now, if you think about Amazon, this has been where I think our personal lives cross over into our business lives. And Amazon's algorithms, when you put something in a shopping cart, it says, if you like this item, you might also like this item. And what it does is facilitate our buying. It introduces us to something else that we also might be interested in. So that's good for the company because they sell us more things. It's good for the buyer because maybe we didn't know about what they were going to recommend. So again, at brick and mortar level, people who work in a store, work in just a physical face-to-face atmosphere can help a buyer get to where they want to be much easier than an online situation. And the big online retailers have noticed this, and they have invested, and I'm talking about Saks Fifth Avenue, Lord & Taylor, JCPenney, and Kohl's, last year invested a lot of money to increase the customization and the personalization for their online buying experiences because they found that people would spend more time on the websites, they would spend more money, and they would return more often when you tailor it to what they're looking for their own personal shopping needs. So whenever you can look for ways to tailor things for your clients or give them options that might appeal to their own tastes, you can increase business. At the retail level, Lay's potato chips, Budweiser, they both introduced more personalized versions of their product so that you could enjoy a football game with your favorite team. And for Dunkin' Donuts, this is interesting. They, in the Philadelphia market, had, for the people who had the app, when Philadelphia won a football game, the person could get a free cup of coffee. That local campaign gave them much better results than some of their national campaigns. So when you're listening to what your customers are looking for, it's a great way to increase your own business. Then bringing it back to the B2B world, trade shows have never had a warm and fuzzy atmosphere, but even they have figured out how to harness the power of technology to make it a more customized, personalized experience for the organizers, the exhibitors, and the attendees. And that's all by creating a schedule of more meaningful meetings for the people that are attending, driving more qualified booth traffic to the exhibitors, and bringing in more aligned and qualified exhibitors to the event. So customization is something that takes some work and creativity, but it definitely can yield great dividends. We all have to try to exceed expectations. If 86% of buyers would pay more for a better customer experience, but only 1% in that study said that there was something worth buying, that says that there's a huge room for opportunity and growth. Which leads me to number 5, which is value over price. We all have to do a better job of creating a better experience, a more upscale experience that people would pay more for, that it doesn't matter what it costs to them. There was a Right Point study that came out recently that said people would pay 30% more for an up-leveled, a higher value experience, a better customer experience. They would pay 30% more for that kind of transaction. So when I think of a great example of this, I think of Disney. Think about how much money we would shell out to go to a theme park with them versus a traditional amusement park. Why? Because when you go to a Disney park, you feel different. It's a different experience that you know it's a special one. It's worth paying more for. When you go to a luxury hotel, for example, you know you're going to be treated a certain way. Even when you go to, say, a more expensive coffee shop in your neighborhood, you will pay a little bit more for that cup of coffee, maybe for the atmosphere, maybe for the type of coffee they provide. Think about ways that you can increase what you're offering in your own industry, in your own business. It might be that you provide a package of services together, or it might be a concierge level service where you do more delivering to them, or it might be by getting feedback from your clients and asking them, what can we do better? What would you like to see more of from us? What would really make this a stellar experience? And if you're not asking, you're losing opportunities there too. So create that special value. And when you do that, you create fans. You create fans that are going to talk about you and be your brand ambassadors, people that would keep coming back to you no matter what. Those are the positive experiences that you need to strive for. Number 6 in the critical churn triggers is employee engagement. Now, this is a very interesting quote from Simon Sinek, that your customers can't love your company and your business unless your employees love it first. And that is so true. If you look at your employees as the focus of, say, internal marketing and creating brand ambassadors from the inside so that they are so happy to work where you are and provide the service that you do, it can't help but translate and spill out onto the customers so that they feel the enthusiasm. They feel the positive energy by working with your organization. By contrast, though, I want to talk about this Gallup study. Less than 1/3 of Americans are engaged in their jobs. And if those people are the people that are directly talking to your customers, they're hurting your business. There were 1/3 in this study were kind of sort of engaged, and only 1/3 of the employees in this nationwide study were fully engaged in their work. Now, the ones who are engaged in what they're doing, they're going to be more creative for you. They're going to give you better outcomes, better commitment to their work. They're going to have more enthusiasm, and that will spill over onto your customers. The ones that are negative and they're just to collect a paycheck, they might not be talking directly to your customers, but maybe they are, packaging things for you, and they don't care what goes in the box. And so mistakes happen. Or maybe they handle the bookkeeping or some sort of record keeping, and they don't do a very good job, and that causes billing not to go well for your customers. Think of how a negative employee attitude can affect negatively your business and how it would affect your customers. It matters who you hire, and it matters that you take good care of your customers, your employees. They have to be treated very well, because if they're not seen as a part of your team and a part of the family that creates growth for you, you need to do a better job. They're the ones that are going to help you drive and create new innovative ideas. And this affects all size businesses, small, medium, and large. Critical churn trigger number 7 is about management. So poorly or undeveloped managers are going to impact your workforce, because if people are being led by a manager who doesn't know how to lead, just because you're promoted doesn't mean that you know how to lead people. In many larger companies today, some younger people are in charge of older people. That takes a certain kind of skill set, and they have to be trained on how to do it. At a local level, you just maybe need to learn how to manage people of different ages, or manage young people, or manage millennials. There are people in the same Gallup study that said 50% of adults in the U.S. have left a job because of poor management. So when you're losing good employees and you have to retrain them and rehire them, that slows down your customers, it impacts your productivity, and it impacts your bottom line. So good employees, happy employees, and well-trained managers are essential to your growth and success. It can't be an afterthought. Number 8 is about client retention efforts, making a formal effort to thank your clients because they're not mind readers. If you don't tell your customers that you appreciate their business and you appreciate their referrals, they don't know it. They just don't know it. We're all busy in our own lives, and unless some company that we do business with says that, we don't necessarily know. You have to take care of those relationships because they are so important to your long-term success. Again, you don't want to have one-time customers. You want people that have been with you for years and years and years. So in a smaller business, you can be so creative with how you thank your clients. It can be simply saying the words. It can be a note to them. It can be a thank you email to them. It doesn't have to be a very costly endeavor, but you do have to do it and do it regularly. It can be access to maybe if you have a sale and you give pre-notification to the people who are your best clients. Or maybe you give them a certain discount that nobody else would have. Or maybe you give them just information. Say you're an accountant or an attorney or something like that, and you give them a special white paper about how to save money or how to protect their life or their family or something about estate planning. I don't know. I'm just thinking about how you can create worthwhile thank you offerings to your clients so that they feel like you value them. So you can, again, be very creative here. It can actually be a gift, a physical gift that you give them too. Be as creative as you'd like to be, but make steps to do this on a regular basis. Critical churn trigger number 9 has to do with siloing information. Now, very often this gets associated with larger companies because if a larger company has departments that don't talk to each other, that impacts how the customer is being treated and how their experience is. But the same thing can happen in a very small company. If you have 2 salespeople and they don't talk to each other because they're being territorial or proprietary about who they are selling to, that's going to impact the customer because they might not get the full picture or they may not get answers as quickly because it has to go through this channel that they've created. So making things open and transparent within your organization helps your customers. It makes for faster buying decisions. It makes for faster communication. And this is something that happens, again, during companies that grow. It may be a company that started out small and kept growing, and instead of investing in a better infrastructure and a better architecture of the communications, it kind of grew with maybe Band-Aids here and Band-Aids there. And ultimately, that makes the customer experience decline. So siloing of information is something that is something you have to be aware of and correct, or else it can spiral out of control. Customer experience matters. It matters to your revenue, your client retention, and your overall image. When you look at this graphic, and we all know how hard it is to take a lead, to turn them into a prospect, and then finally get them to be a client. Well, why wouldn't you do everything you can to keep them as clients rather than starting all over with this process? I want to give you some bottom line impact. In revenue, across the board, companies that invest in customer experience outperform the ones that don't, plain and simple. With regard to retention, 67% of customers are likely to forgive a company who makes a mistake if they have an overall good customer experience, but only 9% of those with a company with poor experience. So that, again, could go back to that service and conflict resolution. Even if you make a mistake, they're more likely to stick with you if your overall experience is better. And with regard to referring, customers are more than happy to share it when they find a company that's good to work with, but only 4% would share a company that's not great to work with. And how can you blame them? How can you blame any of us? This is how it's affecting your business. And that's why customer experience, while it may be a quote-unquote high marketing trend for this year, next year something else will be there to talk about. But the problem for companies that don't think that this is something that is going to stick around, they're going to be sorely mistaken. It's not a passing fad. The customers have so much reach and power and a lack of patience that they are not going to put up with vendors and companies they work with, or restaurants and local businesses they work with, if they can find alternatives that serve them better. So when I talked about all of these areas that could be driving business away, again, every single one of them can be turned around and looked at as an opportunity to increase revenue. With respect to your own organization, on our website we have a free tool. It's a customer experience tool. One is built for the pre-sale process and one is built for client retention. And what it does is help you to do a little assessment of what's going on in your organization to see if you could be doing better. And that's a free download. It's at the center bottom of our website if you go there at some point. And the website is at the bottom of this slide. What I want to say right here is, and I talk about this a lot, that every interaction you have with a customer or an employee can either increase or decrease, undermine or enhance your revenue, your retention, your referrals, your repeat business. It's essential that you look at both sides, internally and externally, to maximize your customer experience, to maximize your revenue, and to keep your business on a path to growth. So I would love to answer some questions for you now. Steve, you want to have
okay.
any questions?
Denise. Yeah, great. Denise, thank you very much. You're right on target here. Again, post your questions down in the chat room area there, and I'll kind of give Denise a breather here while I kind of sort through them. We have one question, actually, that I haven't been able to answer while you were talking, Denise, and it comes from Chris Piscine. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Chris. And it asks, how important is data/information transparency in small and medium businesses?
Chris, that's a great question. In fact, it's funny. I'm writing an article about data and analytics right now. It's something that companies get so focused on because there are so many great tools that can be used to measure things and communicate differently, through SMS texting and just all different ways that you can communicate with clients. Transparency, yes. You have to always be transparent with what you're doing, how you're collecting, what you're doing with it, why you're collecting it, because if not, you create an aura of mistrust, and they're not going to want to work with a company that is not telling them what's going on. So the last thing you want is for somebody to find out after the fact that you have been tracking them or putting cookies in their browsers and things without saying it. So always be transparent. The other thing I will say about analytics collecting is that so many companies get caught up in the idea that they need to collect data and they need to measure things. But first they need a strategy and a goal for why. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Bigger and smaller companies alike have the same problem where they might invest in really, really expensive tools, which again can do great things for a company, but without knowing what you're trying to accomplish with them and then having a way to follow through on them can actually just be a waste of your time. So just be very conscious of having a strategy before you proceed with any tools. I hope that answers your question.
Good, great. And if it doesn't, Chris, just fire off another one down the bottom chat room there. Now, Denise, I think you can go backwards in your slides, can't you? Because Lynn Sousa missed the content of the slide for point number 4.
That's customization. Customization is really just a bunch of photos, so there really isn't anything there. But I can show it to you.
Oh, yeah, I see it, yeah. Yeah. So it's just examples of what different companies have done to customize their message for a given customer segment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Lynn, I hope that helps. I also have a question here from Shiraj Sant. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It says the following: if you have multiple contact points for a customer to reach out and get resolved, how do you keep track of resolved customer complaints?
How do you
so
keep track of?
Yeah, how do you keep track? How do you manage resolved customer complaints? And in this particular case, it sounds like they have multiple contact points with the customer, and maybe they get you reach out, you get a resolution, but it doesn't. How does it go back into one repository of information so you can keep track of it on a macro basis? That's the way I interpret the question.
Well, I mean, that really has to do with the systems that you have in place, and that's really more of a technology question. There could probably be something that you can tailor to those needs, and so that, this other term that's out there is omni-channel, that people want a seamless experience across every channel that they interact with you, whether it's mobile, whether it's computer, whether it's chat, online. And you should be able to keep tabs on what's going on with the same customer across those channels. So that's really a back end kind of a thing. And if you have a pattern of complaints, that's where you need to be looking at the problems really too. Not so much as whose complaints were resolved, but what kind of pattern of complaints do you have? Maybe that's where you need to look at your infrastructure and see why the same thing keeps happening, or where along the journey with your customer is there a problem. So those are actually helpful when you can look at those data points and see why things are failing and make steps to correct them. And as far as the macro and the micro view, customer experience really is, it's both the macro and the micro view of your company. And at the macro level, it's really not whether or not you're customer-centric, whether you really care about your customers, rather than just saying that you care about them.
Okay, good. A question from Brenda Wintz. It's fairly long, so let me see how I can. So her business involves government contract management and procurement. And I'm reading now, repeatedly for large contracts, for instance, for protective gloves, the same companies there are companies that bid low prices. I have several manufacturers, but the distributors are bidding against me. How can I overcome this? Most government buyers base awards on pricing. Which for large government contracts, say for example, hand protective gloves, the same
Is she
companies,
saying that her own distributors are bidding against her? Her own
suppliers?
It
sounds like she has several manufacturers, but the distributors are bidding against me. So it sounds like the distributors for these manufacturers are actually going directly to the end user and competing with her, and she wants to know how she can overcome that.
Brenda, that's a really tough one. When you have companies that sell direct to the end user, and they really undercut somebody like yourself that's in the middle, there's not a lot you can do and especially because the government is very price driven. The only way you can get around something like that is to improve in other ways that they can't. So offering them something more, something better, tighter control on deliverables, maybe a better way of interacting with them, a private portal so that they can get updated. You have to look at their pain points and figure out what it is about their contracting that bothers them. And it's not just about price. Maybe the other companies miss deliveries, and a missed delivery is really terrible for them. So you have to look at the other ways other than price. So either up-leveling the experience, providing them with a level of service that the others just can't or won't. And if not that, sometimes you really can't compete within those if everything is apples to apples. If you're not in a position to price it at the wholesaler level, sometimes you have to move on and go to a different contract. But that's where you can try to customize and make it something, get to know them better, build relationships with those people so that they feel more comfortable and more inclined to buy from you.
Yep. Okay. Hope that answered the question. Here's a good one from Laura Schroeder. How do you determine the proper balance regarding frequency of contact with customers? In other words, too little contact or too much can both be bad, correct? Especially in a service industry. Have a go at that one.
Well, I don't know exactly what service we're talking about, but in every instance, you have to get to know your client a little bit. So knowing their personal tastes. Some people really can't stand to be contacted by phone. Some people can't stand to be answering emails. So on some level, you have to get to know the client's taste and appeal to that. Then with respect to contacting them in terms of frequency, it's not about reaching out to sell them all the time. You should also reach out to be a provider of information and just to stay on their radar. Sometimes you can do things as simple as sending them an article that you saw that you thought they might find interesting. So it's not about reaching out to them too much to sell. It's about being helpful to them, showing yourself as an ally and partner to them. Those are the ways that help you to stand out. Same thing can go for those government people. When you're offering yourself as more of an ally than a vendor, that's a different kind of relationship that anybody in business would value.
Yeah, she's had a couple other bits of information here, Denise, and she says it's an events-based arts and culture group. Mostly the contact is person to person at events. And then she also says you're right on target, so I guess your answer was good. But if you have any other thoughts, because it looks like it's an arts and culture group, event-based kind of a customer set.
Well, that's kind of an interesting group, because if it's events and culture-based, that seems like it would be an ideal forum to provide them with interesting information that they might not be able to get elsewhere, or they just might find fun to know or interesting to know about culture and art and that whole industry. So when you can maximize technology for yourself to get you this information. I work with some big insurance companies, and they work with very specific niches. Some are environmental, some are healthcare. And what I encourage them to do is sign up for Google Alerts and get industry journals and industry information sent to them in their inbox. And so if you see an article you like, you grab it, you send it along with a little note, and it keeps keeps you on their mind. So when it's something like our arts and culture, there may be some very interesting information that she can share with her prospects.
Okay, great. Good answer. She agrees. Thank you, Laura. Let's see. We've got another one here from Kim Fontaine. It says, you mentioned earlier that we should know our ideal clients. How does that affect the work we do with our less than ideal clients? Yeah. That's a good question. Go ahead. Good luck with this one.
Okay, so you have to look at your clients from the perspective of who are the ones that generate the most revenue for me, stay with me the longest, they might refer me to others. Those are your ideal clients in that they're more valuable to you. And you should always look for more of them. And if you have clients that are not ideal and they don't bring you a lot of revenue and they don't bring you new business or repeat business, then those are the people that you want to weed out and not work with them as much. So wherever possible, you need to focus on getting more of the ideal clients. So figuring out where they congregate, where do they work, where do they live, where do they frequent on social media, and getting in front of them. And also just asking for referrals from the people who are ideal clients. And that's how you focus on the good, the revenue driving aspects of your business and get rid of the dead weight.
Yeah, this is always a tough one. But sometimes I've had clients in the past that have, the cost of servicing them far outweighs the revenue or profit you get in exchange. So it's a hard one. We have another question here from Julie Roche. This is a great question. She's a process guru. It sounds like it's a process question. As a startup, what is the best process to build in the right, in quotes, customer experience into your business operation? Is there a process available to use?
Well,
The customer management process, how would you build one if you were starting up a business?
That's a great question, and it's a great philosophy to have, because if you're building a business from the ground up and you take into consideration every touch point that your customer has with you, you think about how is it on their end. Put yourself in their shoes. Trace their path with you. What would make it better? And I'm talking about if you can download that free tool that we have, and it gives you a few ideas about, if it's a physical place of business, how does it look when the people enter? How are they greeted? How are they communicated with? How are the follow-ups after it? And if it's not a physical place of business, the same rules apply with regard to the automated systems that you have. So when you think about how does your invoice look, and these are details, but when you put them all together, it makes for a seamless, consistent experience that the customer always knows what it's going to be like to work with you. You're setting an expectation from the outset that you are going to be treated well, we are going to communicate with you, we are going to provide you the best service or product that we can, we're going to follow up with you, stand by our product, and engage with you on that level. Those are the kinds of approaches that you want to build into a brand new company. In fact, I'm working with a very large technology company right now that is doing the same thing. Before they launch, they want to do the same things. They want to make sure that the beginning to the end for that customer feels top-notch.
Okay, great. Any other questions here? We're getting close to 1 o'clock. I've got like 4 minutes to go here. I don't see any other questions. There have been some really good questions, though.
Yeah, there have.
You stimulated a lot of thinking. It was very good. I'm going to assume that there aren't any more questions and talk slowly so that if you want to answer one more, we could answer it. As I said before, earlier, that a couple things to repeat. We do these webinars the second Tuesday of each month currently. We're going to increase the number starting in October. The next one is May 10th, and the topic is crowdfunding, and Cliff Enico is the speaker. Point number 2 is please go to scorefairfieldcounty.org, where you will see listed both the upcoming webinars as well as the upcoming workshops, as well as the past webinar content will also be available on the site. So go to SCORE Fairfield County to really find out in depth what SCORE is all about and what SCORE can offer you to help you improve the performance of your business. So I'm just going to say in closing, thank you very much on behalf of SCORE and Denise Graziano. And Denise, great presentation, very clear. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm sure everybody did. And I'm going to sign off now. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.